This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Iranian-backed Islamic extremists pummel Israel with rockets from Gaza in the biggest attack since 2014. Israel strikes back, but what's next? Plus, anti-Semitism alive and growing in Europe. And Pat Boone celebrates Israel's 70th birthday. And Springs of Hope, how one Israeli woman is helping Yazidi women. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley says it's outrageous that the world body won't condemn Hamas rocket fire on Israel. Israel faced barrage after barrage of rocket and mortar fire from its southern neighbor. Here's more on that story from the Israeli-Gaza border. Children went to school and Israelis returned to their routines following the heaviest rocket attacks since the end of the 2014 Gaza conflict. Islamic Palestinian groups launched about 100 rockets and mortars at southern Israeli communities around the Gaza border.
This is full force terror. Israel will defend itself by itself, and we will not accept any criticism for defending our children.
Many said Iran's fingerprints were all over it. One of the first places hit was this kindergarten in a kibbutz near the Gaza border. A mortar struck just behind me early in the morning, just 1/2 hour before the children came to school. Most of the rockets and mortars were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome aerial defense system. Israel responded to the cross-border attack by targeting 65 terror sites, including rocket and munition factories, military compounds, and a terror tunnel. Media reports said Palestinians had agreed on a ceasefire. For several weeks, Hamas led violent protests and attacks along the Israel border with Gaza. Many believe this round of violence may be at an end.
The situation today remains stable, but it depends entirely on what Hamas will try to do. If Hamas will try to escalate the situation, the IDF is ready and prepared to respond. Quiet will be met with quiet, but terror will be met with a firm response. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is taking a leading role in the fight for global religious freedom. And in a surprise move, he's calling together major offenders, even countries that are U.S. allies, to push for real reform. CBN's Jenna Browder shows us what this move could mean.
In 1998, then Senator Sam Brownback helped champion a law to create an ambassador for religious freedom. Today he holds that position and is ready to take action by going beyond simply releasing an annual report.
We must move religious freedom forward. We must defend it in every corner of the globe. And that's why the Secretary is hosting the first ever ministerial on advancing religious freedom.
This ministerial, we expect, will break new ground. It will not just be a discussion group. It will be about action. We look forward to identifying concrete ways to push back against persecution and ensure greater respect for religious freedom for all.
A key goal for the event will be to convince how countries hurt themselves by not allowing people to freely worship.
You have less terrorism if a country is religiously free, because people then can express their faith and instead of fighting you through terrorism. And this is in now all the economic and the scientific data.
Today also marked the release of the latest International Religious Freedom Report, highlighting problems in countries like Russia, Iran, Afghanistan, and North Korea. While Brownback believes naming and shaming these countries is important, he admits some type of punishment, such as economic or humanitarian sanctions, should follow.
We're pushing them forward.
To show his priority to the cause, Secretary of State Pompeo called it an international human right and said he was very intentional about making the July event his first opportunity to host international foreign ministers. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
One concrete step Pompeo is taking is to free an American pastor imprisoned in Turkey. Andrew Brunson has been jailed for 19 months on false charges. Pompeo meets with the Turkish foreign minister in June to discuss Brunson's release.
So I've spoken with the Turkish foreign minister at least once, maybe twice in my first 3 weeks. In each case, have talked about the incredible need for them to return Pastor Brunson. It's just deeply wrong, immoral, unjust. No success so far, but you can be assured that we're working diligently on that.
The Secretary of State also pledged to quickly fill a State Department post monitoring anti-Semitism around the world. In Europe, anti-Semitism is a steadily growing problem. And as Dale Hurd reports, it's not isolated in one country, it's been sweeping across the continent.
This phone video from Berlin showing a man wearing a Jewish cap being attacked in the street went viral, creating a national controversy in Germany and causing Chancellor Angela Merkel to admit publicly that the large numbers of Arab refugees her government has brought into Germany have brought anti-Semitism with them. The head of Germany's Jewish community even advised German Jews to stop wearing kippahs or Jewish caps in public. But other leaders called for all Germans to wear kippahs, and it resulted in the largest show of support for German Jews since before the Second World War.
Hiding ourselves, that is not the solution to anti-Semitism. That has never been the solution. That only strengthens the people that are trying to make us afraid.
France was shocked after an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor was murdered in what French police call an anti-Semitic hate crime. She was stabbed 11 times before her body was set on fire. 300 French leaders issued a manifesto denouncing a new anti-Semitism that is leading to what the manifesto called an ethnic purge of Jews from France. Even in Britain, apparent widespread anti-Semitism by members of the Labour Party has become a political scandal.
The new anti-Semitism that has swept across Europe has come to Belgium as well, and it's the same story. Physical attacks and cursing of Jews in the street.
In this security video posted on Twitter, a man is seen ripping the mezuzah or religious sign off the door of an Antwerp synagogue, then throws it on the ground. This is so common now in some parts of Europe, we visited one synagogue that just took its mezuzah down. Israel's president says anti-Semitism is again in full sight in Europe.
There's concern in Hungary, there's concern in France. There is a concern of a new and very ugly wave of anti-Semitism sweeping Western Europe, and I think that we will see more Jews coming to Israel.
Alan Hoffman is head of the Jewish Agency, which helps Jews return to Israel.
We hear of Jewish children being taunted in public schools, and so families say, if this is what the future is going to look like, I don't think that this is what I'd like to see for my children.
In Poland, this Holocaust survivor says people still whisper that Hitler did a lot of bad things, but he also freed us from the Jews. But Jews in Europe today know what happened in the 1930s and seem determined to not make the same mistake again. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
A British citizen faces what he calls a death sentence for speaking out against the growing influence of Islam in the United Kingdom. A judge sentenced Tommy Robinson to 13 months for contempt of court, all because he shot a video at the building where a Muslim gang faced trial for a gang rape. His arrest has set off protests around the world, with claims that the UK is looking more and more like a left-wing dictatorship. Here's Dale Hurd again.
There have been protests from Downing Street to as far away as Australia. A German parliament member has even offered him political asylum. Stephen Lennon, better known as Tommy Robinson, was arrested Friday for simply filming outside a British court where a Muslim rape gang trial was being held. He was charged with contempt of court, and because of a prior suspended sentence, was immediately given 13 months in jail. Some fear it could be a death sentence. As the former leader of the English Defence League and a loud voice warning about the Islamization of Britain, Tommy Robinson has become an important worldwide symbol of resistance to governments that have allowed radical Islam to grow inside their borders. The British government views Tommy Robinson as a troublemaker and has been prosecuting and jailing him for years. He's been unable to work and has had to move his family several times. His autobiography is fittingly entitled Enemy of the State.
How do you feel as a patriot living in a country where you believe the state would like you dead?
It's like loving a country that hates you. It's like that, how it's felt. I have to look now at the state as an enemy of our people.
We spent time with Tommy in his hometown of Luton in 2016, and he told us he's convinced that he's going to be murdered.
I know I'm going to get killed. I know that there'll be times when people are watching this back when I am killed, and I've known that for years.
His supporters fear he could be murdered in prison. Lennon took us to a prison which he called an ISIS training camp, where he believes he would have been killed by Muslim inmates if he had not forced officials to place him in solitary confinement. His supporters are hoping and praying he survives his 13-month prison sentence.
I've accepted that if I'm going to go out, I'll go out on my terms. I'm not going to go out wearing a bulletproof vest or hiding, because morally, what we're doing is right and just. So I may get called and slandered by politicians and media now, but I know the next generation learning our history will know that I was on the right side.
Up next, a tiny fragment hints at the discovery of a new Dead Sea Scroll. It's 70 years since Bedouin shepherds and archaeologists discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. And as we'll see, experts are still learning from that historic discovery. While this may look like a box of garbage, it's truly part of an ancient treasure.
In our storeroom, we have a lot of boxes with fragments that, as far as I could tell, had never been sorted, had never been investigated.
Oren Abelman of the Israel Antiquities Authority found it during work to digitize and publish the Dead Sea Scrolls.
It looked like it was garbage. It didn't look like there was anything here. You couldn't really see anything with your own eyes.
This is the lab where experts examine fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered 70 years ago. Standing here is like hearing the echoes of Bible times from 2,000 years ago.
I worked on comparing the handwriting on these fragments that I found to other manuscripts. I very quickly started finding matches between the handwriting of the scribes.
Abelman used advanced imaging technology to take another look at 82 fragments he couldn't read before. 12 had enough text to work with.
Probably the best example that I had is this fragment here, where the word that I read there is zamra in Hebrew, which means a song. Based on the handwriting of the scribe, I could tell that this fragment belonged to what's called the Great Psalm Scroll.
Another fragment indicated an additional scroll might exist. Panina Shore heads up the Dead Sea Scrolls unit. She sees a special connection between the scrolls and Israel's 70th birthday.
On the eve of the 29th of November, when they were voting at the UN for the partition plan, the son of Professor Sukenik was counting the votes on the radio while Professor Sukenik was sitting at the desk with one of the first scrolls, it was Hodayot scrolls, and realized that he was holding a scroll from Second Temple times. And he said, what could be more symbolic than, as we're voting for the creation of the new state of Israel, to hold in my hands a manuscript 2,000 years old.
70 years later, the Dead Sea Scrolls are still revealing new facts from their ancient past. Up next, singer Pat Boone tells how God inspired the Exodus song and how one line tells the whole story of Israel. Longtime friend of Israel, Pat Boone, wrote the words to the classic song Exodus almost 60 years ago. We met with Boone recently in Jerusalem. Here are the 4 words he says that tell the whole history of the Jewish people. You've been here 22 times.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to be here and see what has happened in Israel in the last 70 years and what it is today?
Well, it's heartwarming, it's wonderful. I step into the pages of the Bible. It's faith validating, faith strengthening. It's all of that for me personally, but also it seems to me to fulfill what many of us are feeling, that the days of life on this earth as we've known it are drawing towards some kind of conclusion. Because in the last days, God said, I will draw all my people back to Israel. He's doing that. They are end times prophecies, and we're helping fulfill them. And that's why we love doing it. I sense that as Israel gets more and more prosperous, The enemies have not gone away. We're headed toward the last showdown when, because Israel is so prosperous and wealthy and they can't seem to get around Israel, they're going to try to destroy her.
Exodus.
You wrote one of the most famous songs, I think, about Israel, Exodus. You wrote the words of it. The music had already been written, but...
Yes, it was a Christmas Eve in 1959. And the movie Exodus with Paul Newman and Eva Marie Saint and all this, a big, big hit. And the Ferrati Teicher instrumental record of the song, the theme from Exodus, was a big hit around the world, and I wanted to sing it. And I was looking for an idea just to propose to some professional writer. It was Christmas Eve, and Shirley was begging me to help her get the last presents under the tree so we could go to bed. And I said, honey, just let me put the needle on this Ferrati Teicher instrumental one more time, see if I get an idea. Bum, 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 bum. And the words hit my head, this land is mine. And I said, those 4 words, that's the whole history of the people of Israel. This land is mine. God gave this land to me. And I picked up something to write on, and I started writing. And in about 20 minutes, I just took dictation, wrote the words. It seemed to me the melody was saying. And I had written all the song, the lyrics of what became the second Jewish national anthem. Until I die, this land is mine. I recorded it, and of course, Ernest Gold and Otto Preminger, they all approved the lyric immediately. And now, Shaya ben Yehuda at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum, asked, tears in his eyes, big, strong guy, you must have written those words on something. And when you pass or when you're through with it, could we have it? We want to display it on the wall of the righteous Gentile. And are we being presumptuous? I said, no, I'll give it to you now, but I need to let you know I wrote those words on the back of a Christmas card. And he said, great, that underscores the fact that we know that evangelical Christians are our strongest supporters in the world. So we will gladly receive that Christmas card, which they have. For me, it's a high point, one of the crown achievements of my life.
So do you feel like you're inspired by the Lord for those lyrics?
Oh, without question. It is a personal, singular declaration. It is one person saying, this land is mine. God gave this land to me.
Yeah, so you think those 4 words, this land is mine, sums up?
That's the whole story. This land is mine, but the second part is, God gave this land to me. Now, you can argue about it, but you can argue with God. He's the one who gave this land to Israel and said, it's yours forever, bringing you back, and no one will ever make you leave.
One of the most memorable times you've been here was during the Yom Kippur War, when you got to sing to some of the soldiers that were actually fighting that war.
Yeah, I was asked by the Jewish forces to just go up and sort of cheer up and be a morale booster to the soldiers who just won, and I did. I was in a bunker in a helmet and flak jacket, and the ground shaking now and then from a shell still coming from toward Damascus. And since the soldiers weren't ducking for cover, I didn't either. But standing there, I talked to the commander, and I said, my theory is that God is restoring the borders of Israel to the time of David, possibly Solomon, but at least the time of David, and enlarging the borders from where they are right now back to where they were in David's time. And the commander, it surprised me, he said, I hope you're wrong. I said, really, why? He said, because it means more fighting, more bloodshed. We would even give some land back if it would buy peace, which Ariel Sharon tried to do, and it was a disaster. So God's given me those opportunities to just, I don't know, to speak His will. And I think I am part of that, and He gives me these opportunities, like writing the song to begin with, and then singing it in occasions like that.
You know, there's 2 Pats that I believe have stood with Israel for decades. Pat Robertson and yourself.
Pat and I, 2 Pats. I often say one good Pat deserves another, and I'm sure he would say the same as I, that if it came down to it or something, he'd just as soon die for Israel as for the U.S.
Pat, it's a real honor to be with you again. And over here they say kol hakavod, which means with great respect. So with great respect and honor and for what you have done for Israel, for the Lord, and for His body all over the world. And bless the world with your entertainment and songs. Great to be with you, Pat. Coming up, see how one Israeli woman is helping Yazidi women cope with the terrors of ISIS. CBN's new documentary, To Life, takes a look at how Israeli volunteers are changing the world. Lisa Miera is a Jewish Israeli woman whose 2 sons survived separate terror attacks here in Israel. And that experience led her to help Yazidi women who had been brutalized by ISIS. Take a look at part of her story.
Today is a painful day for the Yazidis of Kurdistan. It's the 3rd anniversary of the genocide of their people. On August the 3rd, 2014, fighters from ISIS, or Daesh as they're called in Arabic, invaded the Sinjar region in northern Iraq, the ancestral home of the Yazidi minority. Some 200,000 Yazidis fled Sinjar. As many as 4,400 were massacred, and another 4,000 to 10,000 were kidnapped, forced to convert to Islam, tortured, and sold into slavery. Those who escaped are now scattered across Kurdistan, living in refugee camps. Today, they mark the beginning of their 4th year in exile. Some are weeping. Most are silent. All of them are wondering when the world will take notice. Standing with them is an Israeli woman who has dedicated her life to helping them however she can.
Who wants to intervene with a persecuted, unknown minority group in the Middle East? My conscience will not let me sit at home. Although out of my depth more than ever, I said I cannot walk away. Why the Yazidis? I ask myself questions and I don't have answers.
If you'd like to order your own copy of To Life, go to tolifethemovie.com. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.